There's actually times I think I would run a wonderful jiu-jitsu school and I run it through that filter. And what happens? I'm going to lose control of my time. I now have to show up and teach class when someone doesn't show, or I have to cover the front desk, or I have to train all the people. And this one wants vacation and this one's on maternity leave and whatever it is. And it's, you know what, at this point in my life, I don't want that. I want to control my time. I love passive income at this point. I have a passion for finding ways to make truly passive income. I give you money, you give me direct deposit. Always invert. Take a problem, invert it. At first, when you're younger, you don't understand sometimes what older people are trying to tell you, but it's even something vague, like how to be happy. Does it not everybody want to be happy? So sure, the whole meaning of life is to be happy. So then Charlie Munger would come along and say, well, do you know how to be happy? And a lot of us scratch our head. Well, I don't know, because it's always so elusive. Like happiness just like slips through our fingers. Like, how do we be happy?
Paul, thank you for doing this on short notice. And I'm so excited to talk about everything jiu-jitsu, mindset, and just being your best self and overcoming a lot of difficulties, because I know you epitomize all of this.
Yes. I'll start out, Lawrence, the fighting prince of Chicago, the man who lives rent-free in the coconut that rests upon these shoulders, the holder of the keys to the library, the one and only Lawrence. Stunning Dunning, still after all these years, looking stunning.
Well, you are too kind, brother. Thank you. Well, listen, I just want to say, ever since I met you at a jiu-jitsu tournament a long time ago, and I think you gave me a copy of your book, and I think Kid Dale was one of the authors. But I remember just ever since we connected, being really inspired by your passion. And it's funny because we both do jiu-jitsu, but I actually find really passionate people in almost anything. Even if I have no interest in the subject, I find it really inspiring. And the fact that it's jiu-jitsu and the fact that you're a little bit older than me, and I know that the older athletes, competing and pushing yourself, it has a whole host of struggles and difficulties. But your passion for jiu-jitsu is just incredible. How did that happen? Because I know you have a background in Ironman triathlons.
Yeah. So let's go back. So I think it's important to put things in perspective so listeners might even understand through my story, my own biases and why I think a certain way, so that they could either relate to it or say, well, I don't agree with it, but now I understand why he thinks maybe so nutty, or I would totally get that. Now I think that way too. I actually started I was a super small kid. So high school, I was 5'6", 110 pounds. So I wasn't on the football team. I wasn't playing basketball. I wasn't the cool kid. I was the jokester who tried to make people laugh so you don't get beat up on the school bus. But eventually you head to college. It took me a little while to find my groove and my rhythm, but I ended up getting undergraduate in accounting. I went back and got my MBA in corporate finance. I was hired by Ernst & Young, big global consulting firm, accounting firm at the time. Back in the day, it was the big 8 and then the big 6 and then big 5. And then it'll probably be like 2 because they need competitors or something. But that was my background. And right off the bat, I thought I had my dream job and I thought I'd live happily ever after, only to discover I hated it. I was getting great experience. I was learning a lot, but I hated the job to where I was getting physically sick. To put things in perspective, I'm from Niagara Falls, New York, on the Canadian border. So I grew up on the Northeast and I was recruited to come down to, I eventually settled on the Atlanta, Georgia office. The biggest, this is so funny now when you think about it. This is back in 1994 when I got out of graduate school. Ernst & Young's biggest client, which is still to this day, is Coca-Cola. So even back then in the Bank of America Tower downtown, every floor, we had floors 28 through 34 in the Bank of America Tower. Every single floor in both break rooms, unlimited fountain drinks with Coca-Cola products. And this is back before we knew what soft drinks did to you. So I wasn't a coffee drinker. I would come in just like everybody else. You were allowed to bring your big gulp, the size of your head, And we would just start going because we knew we were going to be working all day and all night. That's what you did back then. It's like a law firm setting where you try to build your reputation on how hard you could work and how many hours they could chain you to a desk. And I was slugging Coca-Cola products like there's no tomorrow. And it didn't take very long between the stress, the sugar, the caffeine. You're not sleeping right. You can't figure it out. I was getting ulcers and I just knew, boy, I don't know what's going on, but I was going to the doctor like I'm falling apart here. And I'm in my mid-20s. I'm getting fat. My blood sugar's through the roof. So again, back then we didn't know what we know now. Like, hey, try not to drink 19 gallons of soda a day and Taco Bell for lunch and pizza for dinner, and then maybe get some exercise and maybe see some sunshine, more than once a week. Because what do you do when you're in those careers? You go to work when it's dark. You come home when it's dark. That's just the way it is. So I knew then I'm on the wrong path of life and I got to get off this train. And I did desperately. So I went and started a small little rinky-dink accounting firm. No clients. I'm from the Northeast. All my family, friends, connections, network are up there. And I'm stuck in Atlanta, Georgia, basically knowing the people I worked with at Ernst & Young. And I have to go figure out something. Now, my own saving grace was I didn't grow up with a lot of money. So I was already accustomed to living. I was living, no joke, I grew up living on mac and cheese, Campbell's soup, like no problem, right? So to leave and go entrepreneurial, I didn't need I wasn't trying to sustain mortgages and fancy cars and clothes and restaurants. I was like, man, I was like, I could live in my car. I could live in a tent. I just need to get out of here. But then eventually I had to figure out, like, I got to turn my health around. At the time, my little brother, he was already type 1 diabetic. So he was having health issues. And you just start to see, okay, I don't want to be a diabetic. I don't want to give myself shots all the time. I got to get this in order. So, but long story short, at 25, I already had high blood pressure, high blood sugar. I was heading on a bad path. So that slowly started tipping me to get back in shape, because even in college, I was in reasonable shape, but I wasn't like some super athlete. And then it just starts down here in Atlanta. There's a huge 4th of July 10K Peachtree Road Race. And I always kept saying, I'm going to run the Peachtree Road Race. Of course, 1 year turns into 2, turns into 5, turns into 10. But 1 year I was like, I'm going to do it. And I started training and I was horrible at running and I couldn't run a mile, let alone a 10K. But you slug through it. And then to follow up that, in the fall, they had, it was a big deal back then, the Thanksgiving Day marathon or half marathon. And I thought, hey, I already did a 10K. Maybe I could do a half marathon. And you know how it is. Then you get sucked into that running abyss, which is fun. And you're running, you're meeting friends and you're outside and you start to feel better and you're losing weight and it's social and you're doing trail runs and just running in different places and meeting different people. And then it was a Christmas party, one of my clients, and it was literally, they were drinking. So I just heard they were talking about running. And of course, it's a holiday party with people drinking. They're like, yeah, we're going to run a marathon someday. And I perked up like, you guys are runners? Because I run. And they're like, yeah, and we're going to run a marathon. So I was like, okay, count me in. I don't know who these people are. But eventually, days after the party, they reconnected. I thought they were just drunk and we would forget about it. I don't drink, but they did. They were like, let's really run a marathon. So we picked like the San Diego Rock and Roll Marathon. And we all did the training together. Every Sunday, you meet at the park and you start with 6 miles and 7 miles and 8 miles. We just won every week, like ramped it up 1 or 2 miles. And then we all went out there and we did the marathon. And then I did a couple more marathons. And then I had this Air Force guy who worked on my floor. He was a really cool guy, but worked at a different company, but people on the way to the bathroom or in the lobby or whatever. And eventually he said, real athletes are triathletes. And I was like, yeah, whatever. I did marathons. He's like, no, real athletes are triathletes. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. I don't swim really. I don't ride a bike. But then he just kept prodding me, like almost busting my chops that I was just only a marathoner. And then I ended up taking the plunge because you know how it is. Bikes are not cheap. Even if you get like a cheaper road bike, you're not getting like the full-fledged carbon. You're just getting like something you could do a triathlon, like legit, not like the clunker garage sale mountain bike. But it was still like $2,000. And back then it was like, that was a big expenditure for something that I didn't know if I was going to like. But then even with him, we ended up signing up for Ironman Coeur d'Alene back in like 2004. And just off that one training camp and experience, I was all in on Ironman. And that's all I cared about. I just wanted to work so I could train and do Ironman. And I just naturally found enormous pleasure and passion in the grind because you know what it's like to grind at these big events. And it just fed on itself. I eventually did 13 Ironmans, a whole host of more marathons. But that was my true love. And I thought I was going to be a lifer because I just loved it. And I could never see myself leaving Ironman. But then I eventually fast forward, became something was going wrong with my health and I couldn't figure it out. And long story short, I was eventually diagnosed I started going downhill in 2010. They misdiagnosed me for a long time. I eventually got diagnosed with a brain tumor in 2011 and had surgery. And that was when I lost so much time. As you also know, when you're building base year over year and in Ironman shape to then lose all that base to then try to think, oh, you're going to get this back when now you're health compromised. I was like, I can't do it. And I don't want to do it. Like I'm past that. So I just needed to figure out how I'm going to get back to normal after this brain surgery in 2011. And then it took a couple years, but then I was like everybody else. You start watching UFC, Ultimate Fighter, or Jiu-jitsu, Hoist Gracie. And I'm like, that looks cool. But again, that's early. Like it's not like now, like people that do Jiu-jitsu are spoiled because of how many schools there are. Yeah. And you can almost find schools with different flavors and cultures. And back then it was like you show up and just get murdered and you're a disposable asset. So I started in Jiu-jitsu in that genre. It's still the case in a lot of schools, but a lot of schools are changing. But then I got injured quite a bit early on in my jiu-jitsu career. But I found that same crazy jiu-jitsu was a little different where I just couldn't stop thinking about it because as you could visualize a lot of jiu-jitsu, even when you're a white belt or blue belt, you're stumped. I don't understand how this guy keeps doing this to me, or how did this girl just smoke me? It was just super appealing that you can get worked over by smaller, weaker people. That's what I found attractive. That, yeah, I was totally getting manhandled and beat the crap out of by the big guys, but you expect that, right? Of course, you're going to get beat up by bigger, stronger people, but then you don't expect to get beat up by smaller, weaker people.
The best advertisement for jiu-jitsu is a guy who's 160, 170 pounds getting manhandled by a female student who's 115 pounds, because that proves that it's not the strength and the size. It really is the skill. And that's very motivating. But Paul, we'll come back to jiu-jitsu. But one thing I noticed when you were talking about your appeal to running was you didn't just say it was the running, it was the social aspect. You've got your friends you're running with, you're outside, you have that direct progression where you're getting faster, you're dropping weight, you're getting leaner. And that actually reminds me a lot of the appeal to jiu-jitsu as well, whereas jiu-jitsu is not just about learning jiu-jitsu. When I started jiu-jitsu, it was just, I wanted to MMA one day and I was a boxer. So I was like, I don't want to get submitted, so I have to learn jiu-jitsu to defend myself. I didn't even think in my head, well, I'm going to get some mental benefits because it's cognitively difficult. I'm going to have camaraderie and see people that become friends. And that's a big attraction. So that was really interesting. That it's the same for running. And I think so many people, I really think the problem with a lot of Western society today is that a lot of people don't have that. They don't really have a community. And it's not the same. Even if you work out by yourself and you go to a gym, that's not the same as a running club or a jiu-jitsu gym where you have the camaraderie. But when you left to start your company, you said you were 25 and you had very low expenses. So I think that's the biggest mistake that I see young people make, is that as they make more money, they just increase their standard of living. And then they're never really getting anywhere. They're on that financial treadmill where the more they make, the more they stand, and then you're never going to get anywhere.
100%.
I thought that was really interesting, but also it took a lot of courage. Like 25, I started my trading company right around the same age. I think I was 24, 25. And I remember I was super nervous, but I was like, I've got to do this. And I had a similar story where I worked for a trading company where they worked me morning to night, and I was so miserable, but I was still I had maybe an hour to run to the gym, but I felt absolutely awful. And then as soon as I started working for myself, the stress levels went down. Was that the same for you? Or because when you start a company, the first couple of years are really stressful, but could you just control your hours? And that's when your mental life just got a lot better, both mentally and physically.
I think it was it would have to have been, even in hindsight, like day by day. There were times where you're panicking, right? Because you don't have clients or you don't know what you're going to do. You have to have a little bit of faith. It's the old, I think I'm on company number 9 that I've tried I love being an entrepreneur. I love the entrepreneurial journey. I love trying to add value and solve problems and look at business as a good thing. But when you're younger, I had the benefit of a very low hurdle because I never knew what money was because I never had it. So I don't even know if I was so much looking and believing in my head or my heart, oh, I'm doing this because I really want to be a guy who could have a couple million in the bank or something. It really wasn't that motivation. It was more, I need to control my life. I have personal agency. I don't want people rug pulling me. I want the freedom to make as much as I'm willing to work, as opposed to Ernst & Young. My opening salary in 1994 with an MBA was $32,500. Work 40 hours a week, $32,500. Work 90 hours a week, $32,500. You're right. Like, you start to say, where's the incentive here for all this abuse? So I looked at it as, what's the downside? What is the downside? Because I actually had faith that if I went and cut lawns for a living, I would be able to feed myself, maybe to a point where I would make more than working at one of the most prestigious firms that every accounting graduate desperate was trying to climb to get that job offer. Right. So, yeah, but then at the same time, desperation is the key to innovation, maybe even self-innovation, because when you don't have clients, like, people ask you, well, what do you do? It's like, all right, I got an accounting degree. I'm a CPA. Do you do bookkeeping? Sure. You do taxes? Yeah. Payroll? Babysitting? Yeah. How old's your kids? Need your oil changed? I go wash your car. Windows need cleaning. What do you need? I'm here. And that's not a bad mindset to be in when you're younger and trying to make enough money to go to Taco Bell on a $4.99 coupon, right? You just learn to hustle. The world is either abundant or scarcity, depending on how you want to look at it. And I'm naturally more of a scarcity guy. And there were a lot of lessons that came in the first 10 years of my career that I don't know if they aided or polluted my mindset. And let me give you a specific example. So started being an auditor at Ernst & Young in the mid 90s. Well, that was just when the tech bubble was heating up. So I'm on the inside watching how companies manipulate financial statements, what the auditors go along with, what they don't go along with, like how the game works. But then you're going through the tech bubble and you're seeing stocks trading at valuations that just make absolutely no sense to earnings. And people are getting rich for stuff that I just couldn't wrap my head around and I didn't understand. I grew up a Buffett fan, so I'm over in the corner reading my Buffett books. Tech people are making fun of me because I'm a value guy, and all this nonsense is going on and you're trying to sort it out. But then all of a sudden the tech bubble happened. People lost everything. You saw companies, MCI, WorldCom, Goldman Sachs, let's load them up with debt because they could even grow more and more. And then it was the age of Nortel and Lucent Technologies and Enron and Arthur Andersen auditor fraud. And that was my first introduction to investing in the business world. So all this is starting to shape the way I'm looking and viewing at big boy business and survival and whether I like it or not. And that's where I think it was natural that I found my way into auditing because I'm just a natural skeptic. Trust but verify 3 times. Don't take anything at face value. That's just how I am naturally. So you take these audit skills, you look at really the way the world played out. And then fast forward, it wasn't that many years later, I'm already now kicking off my financial wealth management firm. Stock market goes crazy again. The real estate market goes crazy again. And we're in the global economic meltdown of 08, 09. Real people lose everything. Bankruptcies, personal bankruptcies, corporate bankruptcies, advisors lose their book of business. And it's natural to default to a scarcity frame of mind. Like the whole world can just, it's easy to get rug pulled in the financial world.
We're in a world now where, especially the last few years, there's a huge disconnect between the wealthy that have assets, have all done so well the last 3-4 years because of inflation, and the people that don't have assets, that are renting, they're working a couple of jobs to get by. And they are really struggling when they see the price of milk and the price of eggs and the price of meat, everything's just skyrocketing. And they don't have assets that are also inflating. I'm going through a crazy thing, Paul, the last couple of days. Both my mom's in hospital from an accident and my father-in-law, my wife's dad, he's in hospital with some health issues. And the big difference between them is my parents, my dad was like you. He never made too much money, but he was very careful with it and saved and invested. Whereas my father-in-law was a singer, professional singer, and he was always happy-go-lucky, doesn't really have much money. And now he's in a situation where he's a widow and he lives in the Philippines on a small island. And he's a target for young girls, buttering him up to steal his money, and he doesn't have much money. It's so scary for me to think about being at the end of your life where you don't have time or energy. You're disconnected with the world and the ability to make money, in your late 70s, and you just have no money and suddenly you have medical bills. And that's a really scary thought. So I always think the best thing is to have a good relationship with money as early on as you can. And it's something they don't really teach you in school, right? They don't teach you how to balance a budget and not get over-leveraged credit card debt and all these mistakes that a lot of young people make. What are some of the things with the wisdom that you have for young people to make some smart financial decisions? If my son was 18 or 20 and he came to you and he said, Paul, can you give me some advice? What kind of things could you think? So you can.
That's a great question. And what I would say now that I'm older, the truth is the truth changes in all of our lives because the truth can change our perspective on things. And advice is so individualized because of where we are at that moment of time. So I'm a big fan of mental models and principles that at least I adopt to then test to then say, I like that model. So I'll give you an example in my life where it took me a while to get there, but everything runs through what I call a 4-quadrant decision-making lens. And that's, let's back up one even step. What is winning for any of us, right? It's almost like Stephen Covey, Effective Habits, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Like start with the end in mind. So is our objective to be Elon Musk? Is you're wearing a black t-shirt, I'm wearing a black jiu-jitsu t-shirt. Is that winning? I went to lunch jiu-jitsu today, right? I went and did 2 trainings yesterday. Is that winning in life? Is having a certain dollar amount of wealth winning? So what I did is I started over time paying attention to what is winning for Paul Kindzia. Winning for Paul Kindzia is 4 quadrants. It's, do I have control over my time? And when I noticed periods of my life where it felt like I wasn't in control of my time. Extreme example, Ernst and Young. Did I control my time or did they control my time? They controlled my time. I was miserable. So do I control my time? Do I have a flexible schedule? Can I work when I'm ready to work? Do I have a headache? Can I take a break because I have a headache? So control over my time. Health. You said it on your podcast. I forgot your exact words, but it's a man who's healthy has 1,000 wants. A man who's unhealthy has one want, right? And I'm someone that has had to balance. I just found out on Monday, my tumors growing again, right? So I'm going to go through a whole nother round of nonsense. So for 14 years, I've been dealing with brain tumor issues longer than I've been doing jiu-jitsu. So I know what it's like to not have 100% of your health or very minimal amounts of health. And that's all you think about. It doesn't matter about money or jobs or so. Control over my time, health. Can I live a healthy life? Can I be healthy? Loving relationships is the key, a huge important, proven by a number of different societies and studies and psychological evaluations. Do you love your spouse? Do you love your siblings? Do you love your friends and your children? And do you love the people that are a part of your life? Healthy relationships are at least very important to me. Now, somebody might want to be a Buddhist monk in the side of a mountain living in a cave, and they're groovy with that. That's not me. So that's okay. So if someone wants to be a Buddhist monk on the side of a mountain living in a cave with no human interaction, groovy. I'm not going to pull them out of their cave. I'm just going to say that's not my jam. I like people. So not all people. Some people I don't like, especially in today's world. So, and then finally, I know because of my upbringing, my childhood, my own personal story, Paul Kindzia is much happier with financial security than a lack of financial security. So, we get into all these axioms like money doesn't buy happiness. Yeah, bullshit. Come on, man. Like if I didn't have money at certain times, I couldn't get the healthcare that really changed my life. And money allows you to live life's miseries in more comfort. Everybody goes through problems. Everybody has ups and downs. Everybody doesn't just have cupcakes and sprinkles, birth to death. That doesn't happen. But money can help you wiggle out of some issues and provide opportunity and buy time and allow you to think and squirm and go out the back door or whatever. So now when I look at, again, I like being entrepreneurial. I like making money being as an entrepreneur. I think that's more people, if they looked at money healthy, it's a wonderful thing. You're adding value to the world. You're solving problems. You solve someone's problem and they give you these things called certificates of appreciation. And those are called dollar bills. So I solved your problem. You give me a certificate of appreciation. You're happy. I'm happy. And I get to go buy new gear. Right. So cool. So now when I start looking at, do I want to go start a company or do this investment, I run it through those 4 filters. There's actually times I think I would run a wonderful jiu-jitsu school. And I run it through that filter. And what happens? I'm going to lose control of my time. I now have to show up and teach class when someone doesn't show, or I have to cover the front desk, or I have to train all the people. And this one wants vacation and this one's on maternity leave and whatever it is. And it's, what, at this point in my life, I don't want that. I want to control my time. I love passive income at this point. I have a passion for finding ways to make truly passive income. I give you money, you give me direct deposit. Deal, right? Low risk. So when we give advice to younger people, I'd rather give them models. You're a huge reader. I'm a huge reader. I like take Charlie Munger. was really big into mental models, right? So what would be an example of something I took away from Charlie Munger decades ago? You know what? Like always invert, take a problem, invert it. So well, what does that mean? At first, when you're younger, you don't understand sometimes what older people are trying to tell you, but it's even something vague, like how to be happy, right? Does not everybody want to be happy? So sure, the whole meaning of life is to be happy. So then Charlie Munger would come along and say, well, do you know how to be happy? And a lot of us scratch our head. Well, I don't know, because it's always so elusive. Like happiness just like slips through our fingers. Like, how do we be happy? And Charlie would say, well, invert it. And it was like, well, how do you do that? And he'd say, well, look at it from the opposite standpoint. Okay. So what would be, it's like, hey, Stunning Dunning, let's just get a sheet of paper and pencil. Let's just start writing things down that would almost guarantee us to not be happy. Let's start there. So it's okay, Stunning Dunning Jr., let's write things that will make us unhappy. And it would be like, what if you got addicted to drugs? Are you really going to be happy? No. How about alcohol? No. Gambling? No. Divorces and bad relationships? No, sounds like unhappy. Prison? Unhappy. Bankruptcies? Unhappy. Financial insecurity? Unhappy. No control over your time? Unhappy. So it's okay. We just came up with, I don't know, whatever that was, 10 things. And then Munger would be like, all right, Brainiac, don't do those, right? It sounds so stupid and simple. But then when you and I worked on Wall Street or corporate America or playing in private equity and all these big boys, how many people do we know that make good money, really good money, that have drug problem, alcohol problem, gambling problem, divorces, a lot of them, relationship problems? How many of the people do we know that even went to jail because they got greedy, they tried to pull a fast one, they got caught? So you now start to realize like really smart people make themselves really unhappy because they just never thought, like Warren Buffett will say, hey, there's the out of bounds lines on a basketball court. Let's just play in the middle. Let's not even go near the lines because we don't want to step out of bounds. So don't get right up to the line. Let's just stay in the middle of the court. And I took a lot of those models and I tested them and I'm like, you know what? I'm just happier with that. I don't like a lot of leverage. I don't have any leverage. Like I have no debt. I paid off my house. I paid off my cars. I got some cash in the bank. I started making passive investments. I sleep super well at night. Could I try to chase higher and higher returns with leverage? Sure. Do I know a lot of people that blew themselves up on leverage? Yes, I do. And I'm seeing one with one of my own clients right now. I've had my own clients blow themselves up, which is embarrassing as a financial advisor and a wealth advisor, right? So I really like taking younger people, even at jiu-jitsu, because you're even starting with, let's face it, when you go to the jiu-jitsu mats, you're not really dealing with people that are graduating from the University of Chicago or whatever. It's a different demographic. They don't have clear mental models. They don't know what winning is for them. And they don't have a lot of resources and they don't have leadership and mentors and they didn't grow up with good parental guidance. They're lost and confused. Their compass that's just spinning. They don't know what north is, right? So then if you can grab them when they're younger and say, look, let's just try to put some curbs on you. And now let's try to stay in the curbs and try this. Does it work for you? Yes or no? And the whole idea is you don't have to copy Paul Kindzia's life. Paul's going to do Paul's life. Stunning Dunning is going to do Stunning Dunning's life. Everybody else has to do their life. But then I think there are things that if people gave them an honest try, almost like going to the eye doctor. Hey, Stunning Dunning, A or B, which is clear, A or B or C, C or B, C or A. People will pick the one that's pretty clear. That one's blurry. But then when we look at American life, people have some pretty blurry vision, right? Mm-hmm. And because they don't have a method of choosing wisely, because they don't, as well as I know, happiness is even just like control over your time. Why? Because it allows us to think, right? Like, how valuable is it to have time to read a book? How valuable is it to listen to a podcast, to take a course, to just sit in the shower and just think, to go on a run? And because you've done long runs, you get that oxygen going, you're breathing, you're maybe in the trees, you're along for you, Lake Michigan, you're breathing in that air. And then all of a sudden, you just get clarity on some things because, wow, you had time to think. And if you look at America, man, they don't have time to think. They don't have time to take a dump. That's hard to turn the ship once they have mortgages and car payments and student loans and credit card debt and all these other things.
That's what was so impressive about you. And I guess me looking back, I didn't really realize it. And so I'm thinking now, but us at a young age, taking the jump and not, because I was getting great money at my training company, but I realized that it was these other things that were more important. So I love just listening to you talk the last 20 minutes, Paul. There's so much wisdom in what you said. And I knew we'd have a great conversation, but those 4 quadrants, that's basically the blueprint to a successful life for almost everybody. I mean, control of your time. I think all of these are linked to money in some way, because if you, like you and I, we both work hard, but we're entrepreneurs, we're on our own schedule. We were texting yesterday. We arranged to talk this afternoon. We didn't have to put it in the calendar in 7 weeks like some people. We have freedom of time. And then health, you said it. I think the quote was, a healthy man wants 1,000 things and a sick man just one. And I'm going to talk about some of the things you've been struggling with health. But I think every time I'm really sick, the only thing I think about, Paul, is nothing else matters. And then when I get healthy, I'm going to appreciate my health. And of course, when we're healthy, we have a million things we're thinking about we don't appreciate. But I think there's no success without health. And everyone, the loving relationship, that's so important. I just finished a book for this. I read it twice through. It's about people at the end of their life. And it was a hospice nurse, and she's helping hundreds of different people deal with either dying or their families dealing with close relationships dying. And it's the same themes that keep coming up. And one of them was, all that matters really is your inner circle and those close relationships. And then of course, financial security. I think I don't want to be like my father-in-law, where you're just struggling worrying about medical bills and people stealing from you, and you're scared about paying for that. That's got to be the most frightening thing at the end of your life, not having care. I think in some ways they're all linked, because when you and I were in corporate world where you're just overwhelmed and you have no time, even if you're getting one of those things, which is money, it's at the expense of the other 3. And I love that analogy, what you said about all the things you don't want. You don't want to end up in jail. You don't want to end up getting divorced, or you don't want to end up with all these different things. And so much of that is linked to being unhappy, because you're basically giving up everything in life just in pursuit of money, thinking, well, one day when I have X amount of money, I'm going to be happy. But that's just not the way it works. If you're broke and miserable, you're probably going to be happy and miserable. And if you're broke and unhappy, you're probably just going to be wealthy and unhappy. It's like money itself is not going to buy you happiness, but it can enable you to live a life that ticks off those 4 quadrants. So I love that analogy. That's very powerful. That's such good advice.
I think the struggle for some, especially you and I, it's how easy it is to feel we're never going fast enough. We're not as accomplished as we should. Like always, like we ourselves have this propensity to, well, if we could run at 7 miles an hour, how does 7.1 feel? How does 7.2 feel? And then pretty soon you're pushing VO2 max, which is unsustainable. And it gets back to, again, mental models. Simon Sinek's book, The Infinite Game, right? I don't know if you read it. That book helped me clarify some things like, oh, what we're really playing is an infinite game. And then I started merging it with different models of just what's a good life when you could take a random Tuesday and just say, how would you say you had the daily calendar? And I do being organized. I do like schedules. I do like daily routine. I'm a guy of routine. So it's like, okay, I like routine. I don't like appointments, but I do like my routine. So then it's like, okay, like random Tuesday, what would that look like? It was like, well, I'd wake up at 5:30 and then I'd spend the first couple hours. I like hot chocolate and tea. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I love hot chocolate and I love tea. Okay, I'm going to wake up. I'm going to let the dogs out. I'm going to get a blanket. I'm going to sit and I'm just going to read and write and maybe I'll check the business news. And I'm just going to start the day in that, like reading and writing and create. I'm very creative in the morning. I do my best thinking in the morning. And then it's, by 8:30, I really start switching more and more to markets are going to open up in an hour. What's going on in treasury market? What's going on in the equity markets? What's going on in crypto and gold and precious metals and real estate? And then it's like but then it's, well, when do I want to do jujitsu? For me, I love training jujitsu in the morning. I love training jujitsu at lunch, mid-morning. Like I'm like a mid-morning lunch guy. Once afternoon comes, I don't really even have a desire of doing jujitsu. I want to work or do other things. And I like talking to, sometimes people just randomly call you, like they're trying to pitch some private equity deal. It's like, you take the call, you just want to listen. What do you got? Tell me. And then you could say, that's not for me, or, well, that's cool, but it's still not for me, or, wow, that is for me, right? And you just learn. But then, you're following markets. And then by 4:00, I want to shut it down. I started playing the bass guitar last year. 4:00, I'm like, hey, that's my practice time. Play the bass, do my music class. I take an online learning thing with a bunch of other old people, play some rock music, enjoy it. And then I wrap up with that. And then I switch to my relationship with my wife. So I like cooking. I'll cook for my wife. Sometimes she cooks for me. Sometimes we'll cook together in the kitchen, but that's, hey, we're together and we're going to have dinner together and we're going to talk. And then we roll dinner into the evening where we go back to reading books. Maybe we'll have the TV on, maybe we won't. We'll talk. The dogs will be with us on our laps. And it's just, I don't want to go to jujitsu at 7:00 at night. I don't want to go the truth of the matter is, like, in triathlon, you're trying to pack in a lot in busy days. And those guys and women, they're so good at time management, right? Oh, you got to swim. You almost have to do 2 out of the 3 every day. I did my swim at 5 a.m. I did my bike at 8:30 at night. I did my run at lunch. Like, they're just, you have a moment of time, you're swimming, biking, or running. But then you got to get to a point where it's like, do I really want to do a cycle class or get on my trainer at 8:00 at night? No, I don't. I want to start winding down, read a little bit more. And at 8:30, I love climbing into bed and actually reading or playing on my phone and reading. Get on business Twitter, FinTwit, and there's a lot of good stuff on there, like people's perspective, or listen to a podcast. I love listening to audiobooks. And that's where you say, like, tons of times it'll be like 2:00 in the afternoon. Hey, I'm going to go for a 30-minute walk. I'm going to put on a podcast, or I'm going to listen to a book, and I'm just going to go. It's sunny out. It's 65 degrees. So then when you say, okay, I just figured out just an awesome Tuesday. Did it take a McMansion? Was it a yacht? Was it private jets? Was it hobnobbing with the rich and famous? It's now, I saw the idiots at jiu-jitsu. They're my friends. We have a fun time. We sweat. And then I worked out with weights at another time. I have a nice home gym, right? So like, all I have to do is like walk downstairs. I have a very nice home gym. I have a jiu-jitsu training room in my house. So a lot of times I'll just even be more efficient. I'll invite, if I need a blue belt, I'll make the call. Like, I need a blue belt today. Who can come? Or I want black belt rolls. Like, what black belts can I bring to me? And again, I have resources. So not everybody can pull some of this stuff off. I get it. But again, where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 10 years? Start now. But the whole thing is that if you can nail your random Tuesday, you have a good life, right?
Well, that's so, I love what you said, because you just brought back a memory of, so I was doing very well trading. I had my own company. I was in my late 20s. I was worth a couple of $1 million on paper, but my life hadn't changed. I lived in the same 1-bedroom condo I bought my first bonus at my company when I moved to Chicago. And I looked at what I did at the weekend. So Monday to Friday, I'd be trading all day. And then I'd come home and I'd go to the gym. I'd do my boxing or whatever I was doing. And then the weekends, I would try and train 2 or 3 times because I had more time. And I would, like you said, I like to read, spend time with friends. And I thought, man, like, I have all this money, but all the things I enjoy doing is basically, what do I do on my weekend? And that's when I made the decision to pursue MMA and see what I could do in a few years of fighting freshly, which is what I did. But I think you have to, it's hard for someone who's never had money to know that. So I was so lucky that I was very wealthy in my 20s to know that money didn't give me happiness. It was other things. It gave me freedom to pursue those other things, but it didn't in itself make me happy. And I heard that beautiful saying by Will Smith. He said, when he was broke and young, he had hope. But when he got older and he became wealthy and famous, he was still depressed and he didn't even have hope, because when he was young, he thought, well, if I get these things I'm striving for, then I'll be happy.
Correct. Yeah.
That led to his complete breakdown, the mess he's in now, where he seems like he's very unhappy. And so I think that's such good advice to just remind people is don't chase money at the expense of all these other things, thinking it'll give you happiness, because it just won't. Like you said, the perfect Tuesday for most people, and of course there's extremes, but for most people, that the ideal Tuesday or the ideal Sunday does not require a lot of money. It's these things that you talk about: time, health, good relationships. I do want to talk a little bit, we'll come to your dealing with all the health stuff a bit later, but your black belt ceremony was beautiful. So is the Jiu-Jitsu bunker, is that your home gym?
Yes, technically. I have a studio that's beautiful in my basement. And as you may be aware, you're up in Chicago. You've been in jiu-jitsu long enough to know that there is a wee bit or perhaps a lot of jiu-jitsu nonsense culturally. And there's a lot of nonsense in jiu-jitsu. I'm not a fan of nonsense. And then when you come at life from where I was coming from to then insert yourself into a culture of nonsense, that's a clash. So eventually by purple belt, I was like, man, I love jujitsu. I can't stop thinking about jujitsu. I'll be on conference calls and they're talking about cost of capital. And I'm like, from octopus guard, I wonder if I can come up to my hand instead of being stuck on my elbow. They're like, Paul, you paying attention? And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm really thinking about octopus guard. What happens is you have decisions to make. And I just had a whole series of just bad experiences with some jiu-jitsu gyms and schools in Atlanta. And Atlanta is very older school. Alliance headquarters is in Atlanta. Like the very first school in the whole Southeast was a place that I trained at. I got my brown belt there. So by purple, I already made the decision that I'm going to be homeschooled. And the whole theme of my black belt ceremony was, I think I even had 15 black belts there.
It was incredible. Yeah, I saw the photos. Can you talk a little bit about that? How it happened?
Yeah. So I love jujitsu, but I also love business. So even starting as a white belt, I just started to study the business of jujitsu, right? So I would start showing up at like conferences and what is gym management and how do you run a school and what people make money teaching jujitsu, and I don't get it, but it was fascinating to me. So I had a curiosity and I would just go there, and then you'd see how poorly a lot of schools are run as businesses, and customer service and hospitality. They're just almost, are you really trying to grow this business? Because it sounds like you're trying to get rid of every customer and doing everything in your power to get rid of people. So I just had all these like wacky experiences in jiu-jitsu, but along the way, I always like people would like you and I would be like, oh, I met Stunning Dunning back in, I don't know if it was like 2018. It was a long time ago. I think it was like 6 years ago out in California or somewhere. And along the way, people would be like, hey, if you're ever in the area, stop by and train. And I'd be like, okay, like whether you're somewhere else around the country or next door in Atlanta, if people were like, why don't you come train with me? Okay, I will. And then as I started even going to business conferences, you start meeting people like Elliot Marshall, who has an incredible business.
I've never met him. I just love him. Everything I see about like his mind and the person he is, he just seems like a wonderful guy.
He's all of that. He's also the most authentically real person. What is what you get? Elliot is one of the first few people. Social media is always, I have this perfect life. Everything's amazing. Hey, I struggle with anxiety. Once in a while, I wig out. I need friends to get me through this. I go to therapy every Thursday. Don't bother me at 2:00 because I'm in therapy. And I make my whole corporate team go to therapy because we're going to talk about this stuff. And you got to remember, this is highly unusual because for years, Elevation Fight Team some of the very top guys, Shane Carwin, Neil Magny, Drew Dober. There was a who's who of UFC fighters that trained for an elevation fight team, and they trained out of Easton Santa Fe location, which is owned by Elliot. And Elliot was one of the main head coaches of Elevation Fight Team back then. So I met Elliot again a long time ago. I did a pod. I was one of his like first few podcast guests when he was just trying to get his podcast going. We're very different people, but we just hit it off and we stayed connected. And then we would talk business and online marketing and business and investing and mindset. And I just always stayed connected. I've been out to visit Elliot a number of times, but then you get to your black belt level. It's Elliot, I'm about to make black belt. He was immediate. Like, what's the date? I'm there. Like, amazing, right? That's the kind of guy he is. He's just telling me, send me location, right? And he doesn't give a shit if it's in my basement. He's like, dude, I'm there. You're getting your black belt. Yeah. And that was a whole bunch of things like BJJ mental models, like Steve Korn. I became friends with him. Emily Kwok is technically my ranking instructor. And she's an amazing person, and Stefan Testing. And, the room was just like a who's who of black belts, which is funny because I'm this older guy that started jiu-jitsu at 46, and none of that made sense to the outside world. They're like, wait, what? Like, a dude's getting promoted in his basement, like fake black belt. But it's only if they really spend the time to know my story of, to you, it could be like Reddit, ignite the hate, right? Like fake black belt on Reddit. But then it's, go look at the picture. There's who's who of black belts there. It's just relationships that I built up over time that were built on things even outside of sometimes jiu-jitsu. Again, I started at 46. The whole time I was dealing with brain tumors and nonsense. But at times, my own jiu-jitsu journey was a toxic waste dump of literally getting kicked out of schools. And I'm like, wait, you're kicking me out of the school? Wait, like, you have felons here.
So, Paul, I'm so sorry. Can you tell me, without very specifics, if you don't want to talk about it, but why were you getting kicked out?
I started jiu-jitsu as a white belt at Creighton MMA, Paul Creighton, former UFC, Henzo black belt, amazing school, super clean. But again, that was back in an era that was a little bit different. I'm coming in as a 46-year-old, smaller CPA nerd number cruncher, right? And that room was a lot of big, tough guys. And I was fresh meat to them. So I'm not saying like Paul was mean to me or Paul had a bad school. No, it was amazing jiu-jitsu. It worked. It was just back then, it was fair game that when fresh meat came into the training room, the blue belt finally had a chance to work techniques, and you don't know what you're doing because you're a white belt. So you're just getting lit up and injured all the time. So that was then, right? Like jiu-jitsu a little different now. And for the record, I got promoted to blue belt at Creighton. I still train there. I just trained there yesterday morning. I'll train there tomorrow morning. It's close to my house, beautiful school, good jiu-jitsu. But I had to make a decision back then. I'll never make it to black belt. Like, I will be dead. Like, they will kill me. And I had a growing list of pictures of physical injuries and doctor's appointments and neck herniated discs and knees blown out. Again, you're a white belt. You don't even know what is happening to you. You just know shit's popping, right? So I quit to just get, like, I just knew I have to quit this school because I'll never make it to black belt. At least that was my mindset back then. So I went down the street to a place called SBG Buford, Straight Blast Gym. So it was one of the Straight Blast gyms. And it was a little bit more recreational. I loved IBJJF. I love competing. I love gi jiu-jitsu more than no gi, especially being older, you can control the pace a little bit more. I like the technical aspects of gi. That's just my preference. And SBG was a little bit more recreational, which was fine for me because, I could still train here and then I'll go compete. But then as I would still have the world is my oyster, I would go and train other places. And I already had an Instagram account. And guys like you and I got tipped off of the problems in China at the early onset of COVID. Like, we knew something was going on. So even when I knew COVID was about to come, I built my studio in my house knowing COVID probably was going to come due. And it did. And everything shut down. And I just looked at it as I want a place to train. And then I wanted freedom to run my own training and my own learning and my own culture. And then at SBG, I went out to California, got invited to go to AOJ, literally Mendez Brothers, Tynan Delpra, like loaded room. And I put it on Instagram and the guy flipped out and you're so disrespectful to the school and blah, blah, blah. And I was paying compliments to AOJ. They welcomed me. I had an inn there and they let me train and I had a beautiful week and it was amazing. And he kicked me out of the school because I was cross training. So I was like, okay, like I didn't want to get my black belt there anyway, but I still liked some of my friends and training there and it was convenient, good schedule. So that was school number one I got kicked out of. And then I went to Alliance. So at that point, I already got promoted to purple belt at SBG, went to Alliance headquarters and made brown belt legit. But then that culture is wackadoodle. They don't know it because most Alliance people only trained at Alliance, but it's super drama, jiu-jitsu drama times 100 there and a lot of nonsense. And I just wasn't into it, but I still had some really good friends, still have really good friends at Alliance, but they gave me the boot because I was training in the bunker and not fond of the culture. And I would speak up sometimes at things I saw that were inappropriate. There's no shortage at a lot of schools of what's inappropriate at a school. Most people won't speak up because they're going to get kicked out, right? That's part of the cult and control mechanism. All they have to do is once in a while kick someone out or make an example out of someone to get everybody to fall in line. And I was still like, I'm going to say something, see something, say something, right? And then you say something and then, well, you just got an example made out of you. So I got kicked out of there. Then I was even training. I still had the bunker. So again, homeschool, but I would just show up at different schools. I did, but I also felt, hey, look, just because you have some other homeschool doesn't mean you abuse the other schools. Like they have rent, they have labor, or they have mortgages to pay. Like they're trying to make money. So I always ask school owners, what do you want? Do you want me to join a membership? I had resources. So SBG, do you want me to pay a monthly fee to be a member? Yes, great. What's your fee? I don't care. Fee is, I'll just pay it. Alliance, what do you want? Fee. Okay. Audit, like, what do you want? Fee, great. Other places, I'll just create and I just pay drop-in fees, like $25, mad fee, great. Show up whenever I want, $25, awesome. But some schools are like, you're either jiu-jitsu, you have a lot of non-jiu-jitsu people that listen to your podcast. Jiu-jitsu is still a lot of old school. Wear the patch, fly the flag, pledge allegiance, pay homage, bow to the posters. I'm not into that.
So Paul, that's what you said is so interesting. And I would advise any older person who either wants to start or they may be early on in their jiu-jitsu and they're having a lot of injuries is either the school probably has the wrong culture or you just have to be more selective with who you train with. Because I was lucky. I remember when I started when I moved to Chicago, I'd done 4 years of no-gi grappling in England. I was a martial artist anyway. I was 200 pounds, like lifting heavy weights. Even when I would get beat up, I wasn't getting physically manhandled. I wasn't getting injured. But the culture back then, it was the Carlson Gracie Sr. just moved from Brazil to Chicago. And it was hard training. And some of the guys were nice. But I remember they had this culture where you don't show the new guys technique yet. You have to learn, really earn it. I remember this one guy, he was a student at the time, Jay. He was showing me something. And he was a blue belt at the time. One of the purples, I overheard him saying, Jay, why are you showing him that? And then now Jay is my head instructor, Balco Jiu-Jitsu, and he's built an incredible school. And he doesn't have all that drama you're talking about. We don't really have that. I've been very lucky. He's built a school that's very drama-free. And then I have a school in Indiana, Brownlee O'Carroll. He's an old school black belt, good guy, family man, no drama at his school either. So I train at two schools with no drama. But man, I saw the female students would tell me stories about some of especially the one, my one friend just got a black belt. She was telling me some stories of some of the schools she trained in and just the abuse she got. And it was pretty horrific. I was shocked. A lot of bullying and just like awful behavior. And I know there's a lot of jiu-jitsu drama anyway. I guess I'm incredibly lucky. And just hearing you talk about it makes me appreciate that my instructor is very open-minded. He'll never say, don't train out of school to his students. He's always welcoming when people are in town. He doesn't charge for math fees. He's a very, just an open guy with an open mind. He's not big on bowing and respect. Everyone respects him because of who he is. He doesn't demand it. So all these little things, I think finding a culture, and that applies to anything. That applies to a job too. If you're getting paid really well in a certain industry, you don't like the culture and the people you're with, you're going to spend more time there than with your family. So make sure you're around that good energy. And last thing I'll say is the biggest mistake I made financially was a partnership that I'm still dealing with 5 years later from like a third lawsuit that's tied to this toxic partner I had that screwed me over and cost me an absolute fortune and stress and ruined some friendships and everything. And if I had thought about your quadrant, there was something about him where he had everything right on paper. I just didn't like his energy and I didn't want to be around him. And if I had just had a bit more wisdom at that age, when I first got involved with him about 10 years ago, I'd have been like, there's something off with this guy. I don't know what it is. My whole being is telling me I don't want to be around him. So don't get financially tied to him. That idea of relationships, I think, is so important in business, in jiu-jitsu, in sports, and in ballet. Be around the people you want to be around, because when all's said and done, that's going to be the most important thing, is who you spend.
And take initiative. Whether it's at work, social, jiu-jitsu, there's something to be said for having this belief of personal agency. Take responsibility. And that's where, for me, it was jiu-jitsu. It was like, look, the typical way is not working for Paul Kindzia. I had to go meet other people and put myself out there, and you go through some lemons, but look at the fairy tale ending I had. I joke now that, and all the black belts that came, the funny thing was I was the first homeschooled, non-denominational, it takes a village black belt, right? Because that was what I manifested. I had all these black belts from all these different schools that were not just okay with what I was doing. They loved me and I loved them, and they were happy I found my way in jiu-jitsu, as goofy as it was, right? Because who's ever a homeschooled, non-denominational, it takes a village black belt? It's like, I've never heard of that before. But, and it's not to say like someone else's journey has to be my journey. That's the point. Your journey is okay to be your journey. My journey was wackadoodle. I actually don't recommend my journey. It was too much of a pain in the butt. Not recommended. But it still, for me, was a fairy tale ending, at least the way it all came together. And I made black belt, and it was so special. And I was surrounded by all those wonderful people that I genuinely appreciate and were a part of my life for important things. Like I even told them, it's social media is all about, your son, I want to grow up to be an influencer. It's, okay, what does that mean? Like 4 million Instagram followers. But really, it's very powerful how any of us can be an influencer on one person. And some of the people in my promotion room are very well known in the jiu-jitsu community. Some of them are completely unknown, but every single one of them was a very positive influence on me that I was very grateful for. And that is an important lesson, because sometimes, whether you're Elliot Marshall or Stunning Dunning or Paul Kindzia, there are times where we're, I don't know, maybe putting out an article or a book or a podcast, and it's, are we just screaming into the abyss? Am I just talking to myself? Like what I say doesn't matter. And that's so not true. And I constantly have to remind myself that I'm influenced by the people I allow to influence me. And it's very important who you let in, because even influences are almost like derivatives. Who's that? A couple of episodes ago, some David Little or something on his podcast. Yes. Man, amazing, right? Like gems. That guy was just full of gems. And then even you had an episode where the woman wrote the book, like Small Steps, Big, right? Like super good, right? So what if she said, oh, my story isn't worth sharing, right? Or I'm not worthy to write a book. Well, then she wouldn't have shared her stories. But when we put stuff out there, yes, with Instagram, we can see how many likes we got, but is that really winning? It's more, we have to just have faith just because someone might not have clicked like.
Mm.
The technology just exists where we don't know who listened to our podcast or we don't know who read our book. And I'll show up to seminars once in a while. Yeah.
I was going to say that's so true because I've heard the most crazy stories that have come out of the most random people being like, oh, I listened to you talk about this guy. And then I had a friend he found out that the dad that he thought he had was not his real dad. And his real dad tracked him through podcasts that he heard that we did years ago. Like, what are the chances that happens? His real dad finds him through a podcast we did 3 years ago. It's just that the most random connections. And you're right, just putting it out there. But Paul, one thing you said that I really want to stress is when you said, I realized I wouldn't make it to black belt if I just kept getting injured like that. The best advice, like I'm coming up to my 3rd degree next month. If my instructor lets me say a few words, what I really want to tell people is jiu-jitsu is incredible. So look after your body, do whatever it takes, train with whoever you have to train to. So you can still be doing this. If you're 30, you can still be doing this when you're my age, 45. If you're 45, you can still be doing this at 60. Look after your body.
100%.
Because like you get to, when you're at a certain age, it's not like when I was 20, I didn't get a choice. If the higher belts wanted to go hard and beat me up, I was 20. I was a tough guy. That was fine. But now I'm 45. I have a choice. I have no interest in rolling with some 20-year-old who's going to be super rough. And whether I catch him or not in the submission, it's probably going to tweak an old injury or something like that. Like I'm much more selective who I train with now because I do want to be doing this in 20 years. And I think that's the best advice for people. I always tell the older blue belts and older purple belts, like jiu-jitsu is incredible and it's going to enrich your life so much that you can't let it. It's not going to enrich your life if you're going to blow out your knees and jack up your neck and hurt your back. So train smart. So that I'm so glad you realized that early on that you had that path. I do want to get my black belt one day. I'm so obsessed with it. I love it, but I'd have to be in the right environment to get there. Otherwise I'll never get there if I keep getting injured.
And now as a black belt, it's easier to say things with confidence and authority because they can't take it away from me. But I would say we have 3 mandates if we're smart with jiu-jitsu. One, and most important, train safe. So protect your body at all costs. Like you said, do jiu-jitsu to play the infinite game. So train safe, train technical, and train fun. And people say, well, what does that mean, train fun? When we roll with people, without words being exchanged, you can pick up on the vibe of the training partner. Are they angry? Are they angry at the world? Are they angry at themselves? Are they angry at me? Like they just want to kill someone? You pick up on that vibe. Look, a lot of people in jiu-jitsu, you think they're going to protect you. They don't even have a healthy regard for themselves. They're self-destructive. They brag about taking pops or overdoing it on pseudo pharmacology, growth style. So we have to recognize that not everybody that walks into the training academy is a suitable training partner that can meet our 3 mandates: train safe, train technical, train fun. The hardest thing to do in the beginning is actually turn down a roll. Hey man, you want to roll? Not with you. And then they'll look at you like, what do you make of it? Sometimes you can, and it's hard, right? So the advice I would give people is you got to read the person, but sometimes if you just lean in with transparency and humbleness and joking, right? Say, sometimes tough guys come up to me and they're like, tough blue belt wrestler. And I'm just like, I'm not ready for that. Dude, it's my happy Tuesday. I'm just rolling off a cup of hot chocolate, right? So there's times I want that role, and then there's times I don't want that role. But if I really think this is not safe, this is not going to be technical, and this is not going to be fun, they say, hey, you want to roll? And I'm like, no, not really. What are you afraid, old man? I'm like, yeah, you know what? I am. Like, I've seen you roll. You're a killer. You're a beast. You're a wolf. I start throwing all the jiu-jitsu animals in there. Man, you're a shark. You're a wolf. You're a tiger. You're a gorilla. Man, the lions. I'm just a sheep, man. Look at me. I'm an old sheep. I can't roll with your, look at your physical stature. How am I going to hang with you? And they don't know, is he serious? But you know what? I just say, just make a joke out of it and say, man, I can't handle you. And then they go pick someone else. And what do I want? Go pick someone else. I don't care who you pick, just don't pick me. And when we learn to say no, we really, again, gain agency. And here's another tip. At the end of the day, no one really watches the room. I say you only need 4 or 5 people in class to have an amazing class. I'll tell you a cheat hack that I used a number of times. Say I show up at a class, could be at Alliance headquarters, right? Hard room, guys roll sometimes like it's a freaking prison yard. I don't like all the options that are lined up against the wall, but I see 3 friends that are safe, technical, fun. I go up to them and I say, hey, we're in our own little cool kids club with the nerds at the back of the bus. Let's roll first roll. Can I have you for the last roll? And people forget who you rolled with. So then it gets to the end of class. It's like, oh, pick your next guy. I go back to number 1, right? Everybody assumes you got to always pick a brand new person, but no one pays attention. So that's one of my best hacks that I'll say, hey, if you get desperate, go back to number 1 and number 2, and they want it just as much as you. And no one ever said a thing. No one's ever said a thing in my whole career. And I just got in a great class and I didn't have to roll with the prison yards and the ding dongs. So yeah, that's another good hack tip.
Boy, you just reminded me when I was a blue belt, there was this older black belt, gray hair, older. And I'd always see him being very careful of who he trained with, everything. And I never really understood it. I always thought he was a bit odd because he seemed very selective. And just recently, I thought about him. I haven't seen him in years. He just popped in my head, my memory. And I was like, oh, now I get it. And it just reminds me of that saying. I think it's like, if youth knew and if old age could, or something like that. It's like these young guys just don't know what it's going to be like. What if they're still training in 25 years? What the difference between being 25 and 50, like how different it is on the body. I think one of the reasons that you had so many jiu-jitsu celebrities and the who's who of jiu-jitsu, your black belt promotion, it was so cool to see. I think one of the reasons they respected you is because of all the things you've overcome off the mats. And we all have a certain life expectancy. And there's that famous thing where even if you live a healthy life, it is going to come to an end at some point. But those people that when they get the cancer diagnosis and they know they only have 12 months to live, and they say it was the happiest they've been because it's made everything so much richer and sweeter because they know that their time is limited. But really, all our time is limited, and all of us could benefit from having that.
100%. 100%.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I think in the Greek mythology, that the gods were jealous of humans because we had a finite time. It made everything richer. Whereas if you and I lived for 10,000 years, we were like, oh, I'll get to jiu-jitsu next century. I'll write that book next decade. You wouldn't have any urgency for anything. So I'd love to talk about some of the things you've gone through, because it's going to be terrifying having surgeries, tumors in your brain and these kind of things. But you seem like obviously you've got a lot of wisdom in your life, but you seem like a very just well-adjusted, happy guy who loves what he does. Did you get some of that from overcoming?
A little bit. So I agree 100%. Like I would sum up, like time is infinite. We aren't. So use your time wisely. But to put even things in perspective, it's compared to what? Hey, Paul, how you doing? Compared to what? Like the starving kid in Africa that gets a half cup of rice every day because you can give that kid 3 crickets and he's like, yo, protein today. Yes. School lunch, you had 3 crickets. And yet, what are we benchmarking? So there are 6 kids in my family, 4 sisters and a younger brother. My younger brother was 6 years younger than me. He had brain tumors and diabetes. He had different types. He died in 2020, 6 years younger than me. So that's where you start to say, compared to what, right? Oh, you're having a bad day. Yeah, I showed up at jiu-jitsu today. Everybody looked at me like, holy crap. He showed up at Nova União at lunch class today. And I was like, why wouldn't I? I'm alive. I didn't start radiation yet. I'm ready to go. They're all like nervous. Is he breakable? It's me. Yeah, I've been doing this for 14 years. They're like, are you okay? I'm like, compared to what? Because I actually know there's a guy at Alliance that I'm friends with. He got diagnosed with a glioblastoma. That's death sentence. You're right. I think he's probably going to be a goner. And then at Nova União, where I train on a Sunday at a different affiliate school, there's a young guy 35-ish. He has a different type of brain tumor and brutal surgery. Speech got impacted. Right side of his body got impacted. It really, a lot of therapy is going to take him to get back. Can't work. Tough, really hard situation. So a lot of life is just like, how are you doing? Well, compared to what? Like, we're living in, you immigrated to America. I was already born in America. We had access to education. I love energy markets. We have unlimited energy for the most part, right? Energy cranks 24/7. You want air conditioner? You got it. You want heat? You got it. We take for granted. You've traveled, right? One thing about Americans, a lot of them don't travel. They don't really know what America is like. What, 330-ish million people in this country? There's 7.5 billion people on Earth. Most Americans don't really know what the other 7.2 billion live, and it's not America, right? So for all of our, look, we could all complain about politics. We're all addicted to the TV screens and internet as we came up on an election. But at the end of the day, we are so fortunate. And most people don't know how fortunate they are, what opportunities they have if they engage, if they took agency. Look, it's not as simple as just, oh, we all could just pick ourselves up by our bootstraps. There are a lot of people here in America that have very bad, dire circumstances. They grew up without resources, without mentors, without education, with bad parents, with abuse, with trauma. 100%. I like to think that we could at least help some of those people in some ways, whether it's with our human capital, intellectual capital, social capital, wisdom capital, financial capital. There's a lot of ways we can make an impact on someone. And it's not always handing them money. Sometimes they need human capital or intellectual capital, right? We just need to share our thoughts and our time with them. But then it's life. Life isn't all cupcakes and sprinkles. Life sometimes is a repeated set of kicks to the tic tacs. And I think one of the biggest compliments sometimes people make towards me, like, Kindzia, you got it made in the shade. And it's, oh, that's cool. You think that, right? You got it so easy. I'm glad you think that, because it makes me smile, because compared to them, I do, right? But did it come for nothing? No. Did I have to work for it? Sure. Did it take a long time? Oh my gosh, I'm 55 freaking years old. It took me 30 years to become an overnight success. So why are you comparing your chapter 3 to my chapter 33, right? Like that, sometimes we lose perspective. And like you say, we're all going to die. I'm not saying I'm happier because of my brain tumors. That's bullshit, right? No, I'm not. After my third surgery, I was ready to just jump off a bridge and die on impact and be happy about that. So I'm not one that says, oh, I'm so lucky I have brain tumor. No, I'm not. Like, I would pick something else, guys. Don't pick pancreatic cancer, pick hangnails or labrum tears or something, right? But it's, again, we're all trying to get through life, figuring stuff out. And I know, even as a wealth advisor with clients that are worth a heck of a lot of money, they themselves are still figuring out what I'm sometimes trying to figure out, which is, what's the meaning of all this? What is happiness? What brings me joy? And it makes me realize, oh my gosh, like $100 million didn't solve what Stoicism has been trying to solve for thousands of years. When we really go back and read Buddhism and Stoicism and things that have literally been around for mankind, they have been struggling with these issues. And that should give us a little comfort that it's okay. None of us are going to figure this all out. It will always feel inadequate. I'm a believer that let's just put down on a sheet of paper, write down as many human emotions as you could just randomly think of. Pain, abandonment, ego, abandonment, love, joy, hope, like all these words, right? Just write down them all. All of us will actually experience greed, joy, love, abandonment, rejection. Go down the list. All of us will experience that. That is part of the human experience. How long we allow ourselves to experience those things and how well we are at moving ourselves through some of those makes a big difference.
Yes.
But we should also truly know if we feel joy and glee because it's Friday at 4:32 Eastern time, that too shall pass. It's no longer going to be Friday afternoon. It's now Sunday night, and someone's going to be already getting that nauseous feeling in their stomach going, oh man, I have to wake up and go to work tomorrow. And I'm already starting to get sick to my stomach. Right. But that too can pass if we figure out these puzzles of life with no clear indication. We chose everything perfect because there's nonstop A or B, left or right. Our lives are just like these algorithms with, we'll never know what would have, like you as a professional fighter, you might say, I'm so glad I quit, or I wasn't on the right track, or I didn't make it. You know what? Like, what if you just happened to have been in the cage and it was a barn burner of a fight and you had some flashy but lucky knockout that was caught on video and went viral that then Dana White saw? There's like these stories that truly happen, right? Did Stefan Bonner ride the school bus going, oh, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to fight Forrest Griffin in Ultimate Fighter? No, that's not how life works. You just make these choices and sometimes luck and serendipity interject, but you have to put yourself in these places, and we'll never know what could have been if you didn't ask out your wife, right? Right. Like you did ask her out, or maybe she asked you out, or somebody asked somebody out. What if we didn't have the courage to do that? There would be no stunning John Dunning Jr., right? So these are all life-changing things that happen because someone said, you want to do coffee?
I love that. Cool. It's been such a pleasure. We'll do part 2 soon because I just love talking to you. And I didn't even get around to asking some of the favorite books. I see your bookshelf behind you. But Paul, you epitomize why I love jiu-jitsu, brother. I've been training for so many years, and the reasons for me coming back to the mats have been changing over the years. And the most important one for me now is it's a time to be around good people, like-minded souls, and get a break from the rest of the stress of my life. And you sum up the best of jiu-jitsu people, brother. You really do. And that's epitomized by all the incredible people that came to your black belt. When I saw the photos, number one, I was thinking, it's probably about time. It's been a while for you. But it was just so cool to see a lot of those people I don't know personally, but I know of. And it was really beautiful to see. And there's a reason they all love you, brother. I have a lot of love for you. You're a lovely human, and you sum up the best of jiu-jitsu. So I really appreciate your time. And thank you for sharing your knowledge. That thing you said about trying to figure out what is a good life, I couldn't have said it any better. And I really agree with that. It's really powerful. So I really appreciate you sharing it. Thank you.
Now I have to get up to Chicago so we can roll, and you got to get to Atlanta. Jiu-jitsu. We talk crypto or business and books, and I could probably spend 8 hours straight just.
Well, we both have basement gyms, so anytime either you're in the area or I'm in the area, we gotta connect and get some rolls in now. That'll be awesome.
100%. I appreciate you, brother.